Hi, I'm Carlene with Embroidery Library. If you've ever had your fabric pucker and shift when you're stitching out a machine embroidery design, then this video is for you. Keep watching to see a basic demonstration of how to hoop your fabric, plus some tools and tricks that you'll want to keep in mind. Let's get started. When you're hooping your fabric, the first thing to keep in mind is that aligning your hoop with the grain of the fabric can help provide the best stability. Here's how that works. In a woven fabric, the fibers run perpendicularly, like this and like this. I'm using this tea towel with a woven pattern so you can see this clearly on video. You'll notice if you pull it in either of these directions, the fabric doesn't stretch very much. But if you pull it diagonally, there's a lot more give. What this means is that you can use the strength of these threads to minimize the chance that the fabric will be able to stretch while your design is stitching. Figure out where you want your design, then mark the center point. Then take a ruler and mark a line through that point. When you do this, look closely at your fabric and line it up as best you can with the weave. Then you can mark the rest of your placement lines. You're going to want to use the smallest hoop possible for the design you're stitching, and only stitch out one embroidery design per hooping to get the best result. Cut a piece of stabilizer that's a bit bigger than your hoop. Use temporary spray adhesives to stick it to the back of your fabric in the area that you're going to embroider. Now we're ready to hoop our fabric. Adjust the screw on the outer hoop so there will be a bit of resistance when you press the hoops together, but not so tight that they won't go together at all. Then make sure the hoop is lined up with the marks on your fabric and press the pieces together like this. It might take a bit of trial and error to make sure your outer hoop is tight, but not too tight before you snap them together. If you see that the fabric is loose, especially near the long edges of the hoop, you can very gently tug on the fabric and stabilizer together to even it out. But make sure you don't stretch them, because that can make the fabric pucker around your embroidery. Once your fabric is nice and flat, you can tighten the screw if it'll go any further. As I mentioned, ideally we want to already have the outer hoop fairly tight, so we're not tightening it too much more at this point. That'll help keep your fabric from bunching up at the bottom of the hoop. And that's it, our fabric is all hooped and ready to embroider. Now let's cover a few other tools, tricks, and things to keep in mind when you're hooping fabric for embroidery. First, let's talk about magnetic hoops. Instead of a screw that you tighten, they use magnets to keep pressure on the fabric. Some embroiderers prefer these for stitching through quilts or bulkier fabrics. If you're stitching on something like a t-shirt that's not just a flat piece of fabric, you'll want to make sure that extra fabric doesn't accidentally end up under the needle. Plastic hair clips are great for this. One thing we get asked about sometimes is floating. Floating is when you hoop only the stabilizer and then stick the fabric on top with adhesive and perhaps baste it in place. Sometimes people do this because they're trying to avoid hoop burn, which is where the hoop leaves indentations in your fabric, or if they're working with a fabric that's very thick. The thing about floating is that since the hoop isn't holding your fabric taut, it's just never going to provide as much stability as hooping your fabric and stabilizer together. If you do get marks from the hoop, either wash the item or just dab a little bit of water on it, and it'll fluff the fibers back up to make the hoop burn disappear. The only time we do recommend floating is if you're stitching something like this velvet that you can't really wash to get the marks out. One other situation where you might not be able to fully hoop your fabric is if you're stitching in the very corner of a finished item like this napkin. In that case, you'll want to stick your fabric to some stabilizer, then hoop it up with the area you want to embroider in the center. It's also a good idea to baste the edges to the stabilizer to make sure they'll stay in place. And when you can't hoop your fabric all the way around, lower stitch count designs can be a good idea because they'll tend to behave a little bit better than designs with a lot of stitches. What questions do you have about hooping fabric for machine embroidery? Let us know in the comments. We hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more machine embroidery videos, and check out our website at emblibrary.com for more great resources and beautiful embroidery designs. Thanks for watching.